Right. And we're filling it up. Hi, everyone. Thanks for your patience. Welcome to Teaching Current Events through a Foreign Relations lens with our presenter, Casey Finch, who I'll introduce to you momentarily. I'm Claudette Canarium. I'm the New Hampshire Civics Communications Coordinator. And for those of you who are new to our organization, we are a small but mighty statewide nonprofit headquartered in Concord, whose mission is to provide free and accessible civics programming to people of all ages, political views, and zip codes. And as part of that commitment, we offer free educator PD workshops like this one. If you haven't already, I invite you to visit our website at nhcivics.org to learn more about what we do, and to check out our educator resources page. And there you'll find information about upcoming PD opportunities. And there you can access our free searchable K-12 civics curriculum library. That's a mouthful. So I'd like to give a quick shout out to my New Hampshire Civics colleagues, Heather McNeil, our operations director and tech guru. And I'd like to introduce our brand new executive director, Allison Ryder, who is just over a week into the job, Allison, and we are absolutely thrilled to have her aboard. So yay for us. Finally, just two quick housekeeping notes. We do have a PD continuing ed certificate available for today's session. So typically we'll send them out within the next few days along with a brief survey. So we'd appreciate you taking a minute to let us know how we did and how we can improve things, and what you might like to see for future workshop topics. Number two, if you have a question as we go, feel free to drop it into the chat, and we'll be sure to bring it to Casey's attention. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our presenter, Casey Finch, and he's the Deputy Director of Teaching and Learning at the Council on Foreign Relations. Casey holds a BA in Political Science and International Relations, and a Master's in Curriculum and Instruction. So prior to joining CFR Education, Casey spent 15 years teaching social studies at the middle school and high school levels. So he's here today to share some valuable classroom resources, and help you support your students in developing global literacy. So with that, take it away, Casey.
All right, thank you so much, Claudette. So thrilled to have you all here in this professional development session. It's been great to partner with New Hampshire Civics, and since I've been at CFR Education, it's been a really nice way to kind of connect to educators in my local community. I live in Portsmouth, went to Kingswood Regional High School, so I'm a local, very well familiar with New Hampshire, but I'm going to share my screen. And the hope today is that you'll be able to walk away with a framework for teaching current events, maybe just bringing new ideas to what you already do, or maybe some new tweaks that you can bring to what you're doing. Today, we're going to focus on teaching current events with the tools of foreign policy. I'll give a little bit more of an introduction to our organization. Some of you may be familiar with the Council on Foreign Relations. CFR is a 100-year-old foreign policy think tank that was created in the wake of World War I with the idea of being an independent, nonpartisan research organization that can produce information and inform decision makers, college students. And what CFR Education does is we take that to the next level, where our target audience is high school, higher ed, and the general public. Sorry, what's that? Sorry, I thought I heard a question. So yeah, CFR Education looks to just provide educational resources for high school and higher ed. And we currently offer 3 different products under our umbrella: World 101, which we're going to look at today as we go through the framework; Model Diplomacy, which is a set of simulations that we're also going to look through when we get to our framework; and Convene the Council, which is a game that's found on iCivics. We did it in partnership with them. We won't look at that today, but that would be a fantastic thing to check out if you're familiar with iCivics. Why global civics? We believe that in your social studies classrooms, you're focused on helping create the next generation of citizens that will be engaged in the world around them. Civics typically focuses a little bit more at the local level, things like voting, local elections, state elections, national elections. We think that global civics is just the next step beyond that, where we want the study of issues, forces, and actors that shape today's world. We also know that at the international level, the United States is a key player. So we want students to make a positive impact and understand their local communities, their state, their national, and the role that the US plays in the world. So what I would like to do now, if possible, I'd like to, in the chat, if you could just introduce yourselves briefly, who you are, what you teach. If you just throw that in the chat, I want to see where people are coming to us from. So what schools, what courses are you teaching? Okay, we got AP Gov at Kennett, all right up the street from where I grew up. And I will mention our hope here too, while we focus on foreign policy and a little bit more of the current events type stuff, we do have alignments for history, which I can show after our Q&A session. So we've got an AP Gov alignment, we have a US history alignment, New Hampshire Department of Education, welcome aboard. Semi-retired from Salem, welcome aboard. All right, Milton, New Hampshire. All right, University of New Hampshire, great. Awesome. Well, again, our stuff is free, accessible online. So anybody who wants to use it, we'll share the links, we'll share the contacts with you, and hopefully it bolsters your knowledge or your students' knowledge if you've got 3 middle schoolers and high school age students. Great. Well, it's good to have you all aboard. All right, so here's today's agenda. Our goal today ultimately is to give you a framework that we've developed. This is intended to be something that it's going to be available in Google Docs. We know that all your classes look different. You might meet daily, you might be on a block schedule. So when we share these resources with you, and during the session, we're actually going to share the student worksheet with you, and we're going to walk through that together, break it apart, edit it, make adjustments that fit your classroom. But hopefully with today's presentation, you'll be able to see the benefits of kind of embedding the tools of foreign policy to understand these major international events. Hopefully the framework just gives you a little bit of a structure to help move through more effectively and efficiently. We'll organically take a detour into CFR Education's resources, World 101, Mall Diplomacy. It's a great introduction to a wide range of content that we have produced. So we'll spend a few minutes doing that. At the end of Q&A, I might be able to give a little bit deeper look at that stuff, but we're going to work through the student worksheet in a few moments here, which is our demo. And then at the end, I'll have time for Q&A. We will follow up with the student worksheet that you can feel free to tear apart and edit and change in Google Docs. There's also going to be a teacher guidebook. That's basically just going to reiterate what I'm saying today. So feel free to print it off for colleagues or to just reference it for anything that you might have missed today. So hopefully that guidebook, which is about 5 pages long, kind of summarizes what we're talking through in an hour-long session today. So hopefully you'll find that helpful. The next question I have for the chat is, why did you choose this PD event? I know there's a couple references to why people are attending, but is it to bolster how you are currently teaching current events? Is it to find a new way to teach current events? Or is this the first time you're trying to find a way to shoehorn current events into your classroom? So why are you here for a current events PD? Answer that in the chat. And again, I know your schedules are very busy in the classroom. So how do you find a way to adequately address all that's going on in the world? So why are you attending a current events PD? A minute or two to type in the chat. All right, Sarah's looking for a way to improve the current events that they address in the class. Curious about resources. Okay, we'll certainly introduce the resources organically, and then at the end I can spend a little bit more time after the Q&A. It'd be fantastic to have you share with district personnel. Oh, excellent. So yeah, we'll make sure to give a little bit of time to those resources as well. CFR's approaches to current events. Good. All right, well, it sounds like you're all in the right place, so I'm going to continue on, and again, we'll be using the chat as we get into the student worksheet in just a moment. So why this framework? Again, this is more or less, this is a framework that we designed that we thought could be universally applied across various classrooms. You will need to modify for your particular needs and timeframes. But the goal here is that current events is something that students care about. It's something they're exposed to. They want time to discuss it in class. So we're trying to provide a means for that to occur. Foreign policy is present to some extent in almost every aspect of daily life, whether it be the technology that students use, things like TikTok, whether it be climate change, whether it be wars in Europe or the Middle East or conflict in Asia. Foreign policy is something that, with the United States being a major leader, we want students to have that awareness of the unique role the United States plays in terms of our leadership. We hope that the framework provides some time to kind of reinforce skills, whether that be research, vetting quality information, or writing, taking a stance. And ultimately, this should drive engagement because students are always cued into current events, even though they may not be cued into specifically what you're teaching that day in class. So it's a very great way to leverage ideas from class. And hopefully it will, provide some good support to your social studies classroom. To add to that, I'm going to play a quick little video to give you a taste of World 101. So we have, in our foreign policy series on World 101, we have a short introductory video, and this is how we typically kick off our units, usually a 5 to 7 minute video. This one's 2.5 minutes, so I'm going to play this, and then we kind of continue through to our student worksheet. So here's why is U.S. foreign policy so important? This is our World 101 website, and here's our YouTube video.
In March 2020, COVID-19 shut down life as we knew it. It made a truth about our interconnected world impossible to ignore. What goes on outside the United States increasingly affects what happens inside the U.S. Economic changes abroad can create or eliminate U.S. jobs and businesses, and financial problems can jump from Nanjing to New York in the blink of an eye. When other countries emit greenhouse gases, that heats up the climate for Americans. And just like emissions, viruses ignore borders too, whether they're passed along by a sneeze or sent with a few keystrokes. Threats that begin a world away can, and increasingly do, cause chaos in the U.S. All countries use foreign policy to shape the outside world and protect themselves from threats. But the United States has a unique ability to do so because of a few distinct characteristics. It has the most powerful military in the world. The U.S. spends heavily on defense, develops some of the world's most advanced military technologies, and is one of a handful of countries with nuclear weapons. In addition to its military might, the U.S. economy is the largest in the world. It's home to major international corporations and a center of technological innovation. The United States is also central to international finance, and the U.S. dollar is the most widely used currency in the world. These attributes boost U.S. foreign policy, increasing its influence on friends and foes. So while the world shapes what goes on within U.S. borders, the United States similarly shapes the rest of the world, using its foreign policy to advance the country's economic interests, protect it from threats, and try to address tricky global challenges like pandemics and climate change, or the next challenge just over the horizon.
So that's an example of one of our introductory videos. That's the one that kicks off the U.S. Foreign Policy Unit, and you can see on the left side we have all the different resources, which are usually readings, but often we have infographics and interactives that are embedded as well. So, you know, again, we believe that, you know, linking foreign policy and current events is a great way to kind of make time in your classroom to address some of these key issues. Just out of curiosity, if you could just quickly put down, how frequently do you address current events in your class? Are you doing it weekly, bi-weekly, once a month? As things break, so how much time do you dedicate to current events in particular, assuming that many of you are teaching social studies courses that aren't a current events elective? So how frequently do you address current events? All right, so I'm seeing about once every 2 weeks, or as events break. 3 to 4 times per week at the start of class. That's a great way to do it as well. Dedicate a few minutes of each class so that breaking stuff can be addressed. Once a week or so in Gov. Great. Good. So the key theme that I'm seeing is that there's some frequency that you're dedicating. You're assuming that it's going to be something that should have time carved out for, which is wonderful to hear that you have that flexibility in your classrooms. That kind of goes to some of the design principles that we are bringing to this. So my experience as a teacher, and again, I was teaching through 2022, is that I would do it once every 2 weeks. I had a framework that students would basically have 2 weeks to find some current events. They would do a post on our Canvas page, and then we discuss it every other Friday in class for about 20 minutes, 25 minutes. That seemed to work pretty well for my particular schedule, but it sounds like a lot of you have different ways to do it. So hopefully you'll continue that trend and just maybe fold in some of these resources or some of these structures. So set a schedule. Many of you already have. Establish a template. The template I'm going to share is going to be something that reminds kids that there are foreign policy tools that come up with these breaking events, and then it helps them work through to a policy memo where they summarize their current events. They recommend what policy action the United States or international community should take. So feel free to take that and run with it when we get there. The other thing that we find important in the design principle, however you choose to take this template, is being ready for the big one. There's going to be some major event that occurs at some point during your school year or during your teaching career that's going to really impact your community or your classroom, and it will need to be addressed. We're hoping that by showing students where to find credible information, by showing them how to reason through the different policy options that are being discussed, they can think about things more rationally, because again, some of these events really impact our students' lives and our community's lives. So we're trying to give them the skills to have some preparation for when those big breaking events occur, and not be swept up into the, you know, in many ways, the social media frenzy of finding news on TikTok, right? In 2022, when Ukraine war broke out, I know my students, they came to class like, is there going to be World War III? Are we going to war with Russia? Same thing happened when there was the attack on Soleimani. So the idea is that how are you able to handle those events as they break out? So hopefully this framework helps. So if at this point, if we're going to share in the chat the link to the student worksheet, so you can pull that up on your end if you have space on your computer. But we're going to be working through the student worksheet in just a moment. And really that worksheet that you're going to see, it really centers on 3 steps. So if you're going to repeat any aspect of this, the middle 3 steps where the kids are going to brainstorm or find topics that they want to learn more about in current events. They are then going to make a foreign policy connection to how foreign policy plays a role in those events. And then the final step will be they write that policy recommendation where they summarize and share out. For me, step 3 would be the discussion board post that they bring, or their homework assignment that they turn in bi-weekly. On the bookends of this slide right here, you see an introduction, meaning that students need to learn what tools exist. So that's most likely to be either a homework assignment or a class assignment. They're going to go through and identify what those tools of foreign policy are. And on the other side, you have extensions where we can use our model diplomacy simulations for kids to look at tools of foreign policy in hypothetical scenarios. So those scenarios cover almost one-to-one what we cover in World 101. So what you see on this slide right here is the introductory step. So at the beginning of the school year, if you're introducing this concept that, hey, we're going to look at foreign policy tools for the current events that you're going to find, there needs to be some type of a international framing behind it. This first step, they'll look through, whether it be a homework assignment or class period. They're going to leverage the Tools of Foreign Policy series, which I'll click on in a second. They'll find the 11 tools that we identify. They'll look a little bit about diplomacy and negotiations, and then that's going to be kind of their framework through the year that they're going to, over the course of the year, they'll find an event that connects with the different foreign policy tools, hopefully getting through all 11 by the end of the year. So our Tools of Foreign Policy resource, again, this is World 101, essentially our online textbook. It's organized essentially like chapters in a book. I'm going to play a quick little section of this video clip. I'm not going to play the whole thing. And then I'll show you some of the other resources that we have, just so you can get familiar with the types of content that we cover. So for Tools of Foreign Policy, in the introductory unit, they'll watch this video. I'm going to play it.
Foreign policy is how countries try to influence each other in order to advance their own interests. And there are many tools they can use in pursuit of this aim. Those tools generally fall into 3 broad categories: political, economic, and military. The primary political tool is diplomacy, all the ways in which one country communicates with other countries, both at high-level meetings between leaders and regular interactions between country representatives sent abroad as diplomats and ambassadors. Their interactions can be in public or in private, and can include both friendly consultations as well as heated negotiations. Direct diplomacy between countries allows for clear communication of goals and priorities, negotiated agreements that address problems, and coordinated action. In the economic category of tools, loans, aid, and other forms of economic statecraft can generate goodwill, help stabilize a country, and increase its capacity to govern. Countries that are given money and resources are often more open to their benefactors' influence. Trade policies are also used to influence other countries' behavior by offering access to domestic markets and foreign investment as an incentive for other countries to act in favorable ways. On the flip side, economic sanctions actively restrict other countries' ability to trade and grow economically, and can punish them for acting in undesirable ways, potentially convincing them to change their behavior. The most powerful tools tend to be in the military category. At times, when its use of other tools has failed, or when it feels directly threatened, one country will use armed force against another until it changes its behavior, whether through limited airstrikes or a full-scale invasion. All
right, so I'm going to stop there, but you get the point. We've got a whole slate of videos. They usually kick off our units. They are also available on our YouTube channel, so they're organized. But again, very quick hit videos that summarize the basics of what we're hoping each unit conveys. On the left side of my window right here, you should see how we currently organize our units. So you've got the 11 tools of foreign policy. And as part of this framework, the hope is that the students become familiar with these tools. And then down the road, let's say bi-weekly, when they bring in a current event, they'll reference these as needed to talk about how, armed force is being considered. What is armed force? So throughout the year, they'll work their way through these different topics. While we're here, I will mention that we do have a full slate of lesson plans, which is unrelated to today's discussion. And we also have a full set of higher ed discussion guides, which I can talk about after the Q&A session, but just kind of showing you what the web page looks like. I'll jump to arms control, let's say. And again, we've got our readings that are, designed to work with any device. We typically have a lot of visuals and some interactives. This one doesn't currently have any, but you get the gist of it. So the hope there is that students get introduced to foreign policy tools and they reference those throughout the course of the year. All right, so these next 3 pages, and again, this worksheet, take what works for you in your particular class, but try to break it down into 3 steps. Try to keep it on 1 page, and in this case, just to have things very accessible to students. It's going to take them more time, but these 3 steps are what they're doing, what we'd recommend that students do each time that they look through these. So for this part, we're going to quickly go through. We're not going to fill out as a group in depth, but I am going to be asking that the chat has some recommendations come in. So we'll go to our brainstorm document first. I'm going to make a copy of this actually, which you can do as well. And in the chat, going to step 1, which our recommendation is that you use on a cycle. In the chat, could you give me some current events that your students are currently discussing, or current events that they are currently concerned about? So what current events are you dealing with in class right now? And if you drop those in the chat, I'll fill those in this document, so we can kind of simulate being students. So what's on their minds? What are they talking about? What are they seeing on TikTok? What are they reading about in the newspaper? All right. Israel-Hamas war, that's obviously taken up a lot of attention, and there's a lot to unpack there. Ukraine. What else? Ukraine war. What other topics are coming up in your classrooms? Gaza, Ukraine, Russia. What else? The migrant caravan. Ecuador. Great, right? And again, a lot of these, oops. Finland. All right, so the great news is, again, you're going to get some different response in your classroom, but we do have a social media generation that a lot of this stuff, they're going to hear this pretty quickly and get exposed to a lot of this. So a lot of major topics to delve into, right? So you're going to have students list those out. If for some reason you're at a grade level or in a community where students can't rattle off 3 to 5 current events they want to learn more about or they've seen, which I'm sure there's not too many out there. You can also, I have a friend who teaches 8th grade, and he says that his students are currently not super exposed to current events. So what he did was he kind of beta tested this for me. He basically would give his students a few minutes to kind of go on a series of vetted news sources, and they would then pull the things that were of interest to them. So you could do it that way as well. So we've got a good list of some pretty big issues that are going on in the world. If you could drop in the chat, assume that you're a student, where are your students finding most of their information initially? What sources are your students turning to initially to find their information in your communities? Social media and their parents. And I'm just going to fill these in as though we're going through. What other sources are they using? CNN, WMUR, NPR, parents. Any other resources? Podcasts, social media. Podcasts became really big recently. I was kind of surprised to see that shift from social media, which is very quick hit, to students seem to really dig into podcasts. Great. Good. So I guess the goal of this worksheet, and some of your students are going to more traditional news sources, not just TikTok, which is good to see. The goal here is to have them fill out what's their current event, what do they think they know about the current events, with the idea that there's a lot to unpack in a lot of these cases, right? So there's probably a lot of things they don't know, or a lot of things that, you know, might be misunderstood. So they're gonna jot down kind of that, what they know, what they think they know, where they found that information. Because, for instance, if there's something that's way out of whack and they put TikTok, this can be their chance to find out, to take a step back and to dig into some vetted news sources and go through. So each time we'd recommend they follow the chart, just to make sure that they're hopefully getting information from a couple different sources, not just one, to try to find, to dig in a little bit. So they'll kind of fill out that information, list the current event, and then what do they want to learn more about. So plenty of the cases that you brought up, there should be a lot of questions to unpack, and that can be challenging. And we're not building a whole session about how to ask good questions or how to teach asking good questions. But, you know, for example, we got Israel, Hamas, Ukraine, Russia. Those are all very complex issues. There's history that needs to be understood there. There's typically multiple parties, like even Israel, Hamas. The problem there is there's so many different parties involved, whether it be Iran, whether it be Hezbollah, whether it be the Palestinians in Gaza versus the Hamas group. So having them list those questions out would allow them the time and the space to find out who these different individuals are, what is the historical context, and what's some of the concerns there. So again, it's a pretty simplistic worksheet that you can build upon, but hopefully you find that useful in your classrooms. The second one would be applying the foreign policy tools. So again, students way back, in the introductory step, they were introduced to the foreign policy tools that do exist: political, economic, military, other. And now they're going to make that connection. So students are going to identify the current event they want to write a policy brief on, talk a little more about. For time's sake, I'm just going to put Ukraine, Russia, or the war in Ukraine, right? If they pick that, they then need to identify some tools of foreign policy that ideally they haven't addressed yet, because we're assuming that they might be going to read for the first time that section. So with Ukraine, Russia, some of the things that were discussed were the US could engage in economic sanctions against Russia. We also know that there was, in different types of ways, the US was discussing armed force or maybe deterrence, right? Using NATO and other things to step in. So they're going to identify the tools they want to look at. You should encourage them to use the one they haven't done yet. So in this case, let's say there's a discussion about economic sanctions, armed force. They can then jump back, because chances are this is weeks or months after you introduce this. They can go back to their reading, double check what economic sanctions are, so they can, you know, learn or relearn what the benefit of using that is to inform their policy brief. They could then say, look at armed force, right? So it gives them an excuse to go back and build in some content. And then that allows them to kind of consider those two policy tools and then prep for their policy memo, which ultimately will consist of a summary of the current events, the tools that are being discussed or being implemented in that current event, and a policy proposal. And that's what they're going to turn in. That's what they're going to share with class. So that's the framework in a nutshell, in terms of, if you distill it down to the 3 key steps. The last piece I said that was an extension was our model diplomacy series. These are short one-page cases that are hypothetical scenarios that have students consider the policy options for, let's say, using armed force, using economic sanctions. So this is listed as an extension. You might just choose to use this as your means of teaching the foreign policy tool. So maybe the kids don't read the World 101 case. Maybe you decide to spend a portion of a class every couple of weeks, every month, looking at one of these cases. So the Tools of Foreign Policy series, again, you can come right to our webpage. It's accessible to anybody. Very short. They'll give a quick overview about where armed force might be used hypothetically, some imaginary countries, governments, and then there's usually 3 options for what the students can choose to do. So we've had teachers use this as a corners activity where students have to debate what they think the best option is and then come back together. We've had teachers assign this for homework where the kids will read the one pager, then come into the next class to discuss it. But again, we have a whole series of our pop-up cases that address those issues. So this could be another avenue to take it. So again, framework, the worksheets are just a recommendation, but these are all accessible, and this could be a great way to make an activity for students to learn from. And they could also, again, be paired with our World 101 series. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. So at this point, I want to turn it over to questions. I know I went through quite a bit. So I'm going to open it up to questions. Feel free to raise your hand and speak, or you can enter any questions you might have in the meeting chat. We'll do the Q&A for a few minutes, and then I'm happy to stay on after to give a more in-depth walkthrough of some of our products. I'm just seeing Sarah's message. Sorry to hear that, Sarah. So any questions about the framework? Any questions about resources, or would it be helpful to spend a few minutes looking through the products that we have? What's on your mind? Any thoughts, any ideas for how you could adapt this for your classroom? Good question. Are resources good for high school only, or have you adapted them for middle school? So the good news is for the most part, we've had quite a few middle school teachers use our resources. We don't adapt them or level them ourselves, but in terms of the range, we do know that some middle schools use World 101. In particular, we're hearing from middle school teachers that use the video resources because those tend to have good visuals and resource. In terms of upper elementary, in some cases, it might be possible, but again, the videos might be the best for that. Convene the Council, which is the game that I had mentioned before, that tends to be used quite heavily by middle school and high school as well. So Convene the Council could be a good bridge for those two, and I'll share those links after. And I'll address a couple of questions, and then I'll kind of spend a few minutes maybe looking at our products. Let's see. Curious about who is involved in developing the products and the key principles. So we work closely we have a whole series of fellows at CFR. They give us a lot of research to go off of. So we've got Foreign Affairs Magazine, some of the CFR.org explainers and backgrounders. When we write content, we have a content team in education. Dr. Rachel George came on with this. She specializes in international development. So she drafts stuff in collaboration with our fellows. So, and again, there's World 101 kind of came from one of Richard Haas's old books. That was kind of the impetus to create that and structure it the way we did. Model diplomacy was influenced by several people. So I guess from the organization in general, we've got quite a bit of insights there. But yeah, it's a pretty robust staff. So the nice thing is we have lots of input and a big content team. So lots of people get to really make sure these are quality, authoritative, and useful. So, all right. If there's not any other questions, I can navigate to our website real quick to show you a couple other things that I haven't addressed in this framework. So I'm going to spend maybe 5 minutes just doing a quick walkthrough of stuff we missed. So framework has been shared with you. We'll share you the teacher guide as well. But I will jump back to I'll give a very quick walkthrough of stuff that I might have missed in World 101. So for World 101, this is essentially our online textbook, like I said before. Our current structure looks like this, that we organize into global era issues, regions of the world, understanding the international system, contemporary history, and foreign policy. Underneath each of those will be our units and all our resources. I'm going to actually just click on contemporary history. The reason being is that a lot of people come to us in the foreign policy mindset or in the current events mindset, but some of our most popular resources actually come from our history units, which could be helpful in some of your classes. So, for example, World at War, we do cover quite a bit. So World War I, World War II, obviously. But our most popular resource based on clicks is What is Fascism? The reason I'm showing that is because that is a pretty good example of some of the multimedia assets that we include. So we have interactives that are embedded in many of our links. So this kind of walks through the map of all the different fascist leaders around the world. We use this geographic map interactive for several different things. Excuse me. We try to really, not only is our content well written, in my opinion, but we also do a really good job with infographics. So we have a variety of these that can be pulled for use in a variety of ways. We use a lot of data, a lot of graphs, so there's multiple ways for students to access knowledge, and I thought this one was a good one to share. While we're here, I'll also mention that we do have a whole series of lesson plans. So if you look at every single World 101 asset we have, if you click on this, we've got a Google Doc that has a recommended lesson plan with the idea that you can make a copy of it, you can modify it as you see fit. We include a guided reading handout, which are basically just questions that go through in sequence to help students out. We have a presentation, which has all our visuals in one Google document if you want to have it projected on the board. Discussion guide, which has some questions. We do provide a vocabulary list if that's helpful for making flashcards wherever you may use it. And in some cases, we'll have activities attached. So in this case, it's a gallery walk activity that's done as Google Slides. So every single resource we have has a lesson plan attached to it. The link that I'll make sure gets shared with you is to make this a little bit easier to find. We have a catalog, a full list of lesson plans. We keep this up to date as we add new resources, conflict, forms of government. We've actually updated those lesson plans to reflect those changes. And region of the world, for those who teach geography, there's a whole series of lesson plans that's connected with that as well. So hopefully you find that useful. Jumping back to World 101, if it's helpful or you need these type of alignments, if you click on the hamburger menu, you go to instructor resources, under standard search, we have alignments for popular courses. So if you're, let's say, an AP US history teacher, we have aligned kind of our best resources. So we're trying to make it a little bit more simplified. If you want a full list of resources, you can come down here, you can jump to New Hampshire, you can search the grade that you teach, and then you'll get a link to the alignment with every single resource that aligns with that standard. So in this case, it links right to our units there. So hopefully that's helpful in that regard. So that's World 101. While we're here, I'll also quickly jump for a minute or two to model diplomacy. We spent our time in pop-up cases, so I'm going to click on pop-up cases because that's what I'd recommend you starting with. They're short, they're easier to access, and then you could step up to the full case library. We try to tie these to the news whenever possible. So as you can see, one of our newest cases is, should the United States ban TikTok to preserve national security? This was timely last summer. I still think it's something that kids would enjoy discussing. So you can go right to that simulation and talk to it. If your kids are having a hard time understanding Russia's war in Ukraine, you can go right to that series, and there's it provides some historical context as they go through. But again, these are all one-pagers meant to be very accessible in the classroom and provide a little bit more context about, you know, the role that NATO might play there. So those are our two main resources that I've showed in the framework today. Convene the council. That's hosted on iCivics. We created a partnership with them. This is a game that would be fantastic for middle school and high school classrooms. I think that maybe upper elementary might also enjoy playing this game too, but typically this takes about 30 minutes to play through. So those are our three major resources. I gave quite a bit there. So I'm going to stop my screen share. If there's any other questions, I'd be happy to answer those today. If not, I am available to be reached by email, and we'll follow up with links to the documents in the framework, as well as links to CFR.org materials. But happy to field any other questions in the chat. And if not, just really appreciate you attending, and please feel free to share these resources, use them, and we hope that they're very valuable for you in your classroom. All right, and if there's no more questions, I think I will pass it back to Claudette.
All right, awesome. Thank you so much, Casey. Let me get my video back on. There I am. Thank you so much for that information. And for those of you on here, this was not Casey's first rodeo with us. We are doing a series of workshops with the Council on Foreign Relations. So we will be welcoming Casey Finch back at some point soon. Please visit our website to keep up to date on our events and workshops, and you will also be receiving emails from us promoting these events. I will also be emailing any of the resources that were listed in our chat today in case you didn't grab them. I just dropped in the survey as well. If you have a minute to do that, it would be very helpful. I will also send that along as part of our follow-up email tomorrow with your certificates. So that being said, thank you all for attending. And I forgot to say Happy New Year. So Happy New Year. And we'll see you again soon. Take care. Thank you.